During a stormy night on the outskirts of Seattle, a wealthy tech entrepreneur is preparing for the peaceful life he thought he wanted, until a frightened little black girl steps out of the shadows begging him not to start his prized red Mustang. What seems like a strange encounter quickly unravels into a web of betrayal, a $50 million murder plot, and a fiancé hiding deadly secrets behind a perfect smile. But beneath the danger lies something even more powerful, the bond between a man who never knew how much he needed someone and a child who had no one left. This isn't just a story about survival, it's about resilience, trust, and the kind of love that's chosen, not inherited. If this story stirred something in you, don't just scroll away. Tell us how it made you feel, and stay close for the next chapter of this heartwarming journey. The wind in Portland that night was sharp, carrying a bitter edge that made it feel colder than it was. It wasn't snowing yet, but the air had that heaviness that warned of the season turning for good. The streets were quiet, no cars passing, no children playing, just the dull hum of the city in the distance, and the rustling of brittle leaves scattered across cracked sidewalks. On the concrete steps of an old brick apartment complex that had seen better days, a small girl sat alone, her knees pulled up to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around them. Her jacket was too thin, her jeans were torn at the knee, and her shoes had holes in them, the rubber peeling away like old paint. Her name was Jade Walker. She was 6 years old and had nowhere to go. She hadn't spoken to another person in days, not really. A grocery store clerk had barked at her when she lingered too long near the bakery display, and a tired-looking woman at the corner store had handed her a bruised banana without saying a word. The last person who truly spoke to her, who looked at her like she mattered, was her grandmother Eden, and that was almost 3 months ago. Eden had died in a hospital bed that beeped slower and slower until it just stopped. Jade hadn't cried then, not at the hospital, not even when they zipped up the bag. But she cried in the dark. Quietly. Alone. The apartment she used to share with Eden hadn't been hers for weeks. After Eden passed, the building supervisor came by once, then again, then not at all. A neighbor, a kind woman who meant well, called Child Protective Services. They came with soft voices and hard eyes, looked over Jade's clothes and the place she slept, and told her they were going to help. But Jade remembered what happened to Jordan, the boy, from 2 floors up. He was 8, just a little older than her. When his mom died, they took him away. He promised to come back and say goodbye to the building, to bring pictures of the home they placed him in. He never did. No one ever saw him again. Jade didn't want to disappear. She didn't want to be passed around, moved from place to place, judged by adults who looked at her skin before they looked at her face. So she ran. She packed the photograph of Eden, a few crackers, a bottle of water, and the sweatshirt Eden wore when she gardened. And she walked. She moved mostly at night when the city was asleep, slipping through alleys and between fences, staying low and quiet. Her feet ached, her stomach growled constantly, but the fear of being caught, of being placed somewhere temporary and forgotten, kept her going. That night, the wind chased her down from northeast Portland into a neighborhood she'd never dared enter before. Laurel Heights. It was the kind of place with homes that looked like catalog pages, lawns trimmed with perfect lines, gates that whispered open with a keypad, and houses that glowed with warm lighting behind frosted glass. It was a different world, rich, white, silent. She didn't belong here. She knew it. The way people in cars slowed down when they passed her on the street. The way a woman clutched her purse tighter when Jade stood near a bus stop. People didn't say the words out loud, but they didn't have to. She heard it in their tone. She felt it in their eyes. She understood, even if no one ever explained it to her. As she walked along the sidewalk, Jade's attention was caught by something unusual. A house near the corner had its garage door cracked open just enough to let out a strip of golden light. It spilled onto the driveway like a small invitation. She moved closer cautiously. There was no sound of voices, just the soft tick of cooling metal and the low hum of a space heater. Inside the garage was unlike anything Jade had ever seen. There were spotless white floors, cabinets lined with tools that gleamed like jewelry, and in the center, under the halo of warm overhead lights, was a car, a red Mustang. It looked like it belonged in a museum. Its paint was so clean it reflected like glass. Someone had spent a lot of time making this place perfect. It smelled like leather and polish and the faint chemical tang of oil. And most importantly, it was warm. Jade didn't rush. She waited. She crouched in the bushes across the street for over an hour, watching the house, holding her breath every time a shadow passed by a window. Finally, the man who owned the house, tall, middle-aged white, wearing a dark coat, walked out of the garage. He turned off the lights, locked the main door with a keypad, and got into a sleek black car parked outside. Then he drove off. She waited 5 more minutes. Then, with her heart pounding so hard it hurt her ribs, Jade crossed the street, ducked under the garage door's narrow opening, and slipped inside. The warmth hit her immediately. It wasn't hot, but compared to the freezing wind outside, it felt like a hug. She stayed still for a long moment, crouching by the door, listening for alarms or footsteps. Nothing happened. Slowly, she stood, keeping low, and scanned the room for a place to hide. In the back corner, behind a stack of moving boxes and a covered workbench, there was a narrow gap just big enough for her to slip through. It was dark, a little dusty, but it was out of sight. She crawled in, clutching her backpack, and sat with her knees pulled up again. From her bag, she pulled out Eden's picture. It was worn, edges soft from being handled too many times. Eden was smiling in it, her eyes gentle behind glasses, her hands in dirt, surrounded by pots of flowers she used to grow on the apartment balcony. Jade pressed the photo to her chest and whispered so softly, only she could hear it. "Just one night, okay? Just one night where I'm not freezing. I promise I'll be quiet." She didn't know who the man was who lived here. She didn't know about the Mustang or the cameras or the keypad that locked everything tight. She didn't care. All she knew was that this place was warm and she was tired of running. That night, as the wind howled outside and the stars disappeared behind clouds, Jade slept in a stranger's garage, hidden from the world that had turned its back on her. She didn't know it yet, but the space she'd found was more than just a place to rest. It was the edge of something bigger, something dangerous, something hopeful. Her story hadn't ended with Eden's final breath. It was only just beginning. The morning sunlight crept through the garage windows in narrow strips, cutting across the floor and casting a soft glow on the red Mustang, like stage lights on a performer waiting in silence. The quiet inside was steady, the kind of quiet that made every small sound matter. From behind the stack of toolboxes and moving crates, Jade stirred awake, her body stiff and chilled, even in the protected warmth of the garage. Her little fingers tightened around the worn edges of her grandmother's photo as her eyes adjusted to the light. She hadn't slept much. Every unfamiliar creak in the night had made her flinch. Still, this garage had offered something she hadn't felt in weeks: safety. It smelled like motor oil and leather, and it was warmer than any stairwell or alley she'd hidden in before. She stayed still, breathing carefully, listening. A muffled voice approached from the house, followed by the soft electronic hum of the garage door unlocking. Jade's heartbeat picked up. She slid further back into her hiding spot, pulling her legs close, tucking her chin, becoming smaller. She didn't want to run. Not yet. Not if she didn't have to. She peeked through the narrow opening between 2 plastic crates, her eyes level with the sleek red car's rear bumper. The man who stepped into the garage looked just like she remembered from the night before, except now he wasn't in a coat. He wore a gray zip-up sweater, dark jeans, and a pair of black house slippers. His name, though she didn't know it yet, was Basil Watts. He moved with purpose, but not urgency, his hands carrying a microfiber cloth and a bottle of polish. He walked to the Mustang like someone greeting an old friend. As he approached, he gave the fender a soft pat, then leaned over the hood and exhaled with a quiet chuckle. "Well, here we are," he said softly, his voice low and even. "One more weekend, and then you're back on the road." He began to wipe the hood in careful circles, polishing already spotless paint with methodical attention. Jade watched his hands. They were big, but they moved gently, like how her grandmother used to rub ointment on her scraped knees. He didn't talk like the people on the street or the social workers who had looked past her. There was no hardness in his tone, no edge of control or fear. He wasn't showing off. He just loved this car. The moment was broken by the sound of heels on polished concrete. Jade froze again. A woman's voice followed the click of shoes, and though the words were pleasant, her tone carried something sharp underneath. "There you are," the woman said. "I've been wondering where you keep disappearing to." Basil straightened up, turning to look at her with a relaxed smile. "Just giving the Mustang a little love. You know how I am." The woman stepped into full view. She was striking tall, with long hair pulled into a neat twist, wearing a fitted white blouse and tailored pants. Her makeup was flawless, but it wasn't what Jade noticed. It was the way her smile seemed to stretch just a second too long, and the way her eyes didn't crinkle at the corners when she laughed. Jade couldn't name what felt wrong, but it settled into her like a warning. Scarlett Rogers walked closer to Basil, her heels tapping softly. She placed a hand on his arm, looked at the car, and tilted her head slightly. "This is your big surprise?" she asked playfully. "Something old for something new," Basil replied with a laugh. He looked genuinely pleased with himself. "She's ready for the road again. I figured after the ceremony we could take a quick drive along the coast. Just you, me, and the open highway." Scarlett's smile flickered, just for a moment. Then it returned full force, but Jade had seen it, the drop in her expression, before she caught herself. Scarlett ran her fingers slowly along the curve of the hood. "It's beautiful," she said, pausing on the word like she was still deciding. "How much is something like this worth?" Now Basil didn't seem to notice the question's edge. "Hard to say. She's priceless to me. My dad and I rebuilt the engine when I was 12. Every bolt, every panel. It was our thing." Scarlett nodded, but her hand lingered on the car a beat too long. "And the insurance. You got that updated right, for the wedding and all. We're combining assets now, remember?" Basil chuckled again, not defensive, just amused. "Of course. Everything's in place." Behind the crates, Jade's eyes stayed locked on Scarlett. Her instincts prickled. She didn't understand words like assets or insurance policy, but the way Scarlett's voice dipped just a little when she said it made her remember the tone of that man who'd once threatened to tow Eden's car. Sweet on the surface, but cold underneath. Scarlett took a small step closer to Basil, straightening his collar. "I still think it's risky," she murmured. "That drive along the cliffs. I mean, one sharp turn." "It's a celebration," Basil said. "Nothing dangerous. Just a drive to the overlook, then back. I haven't taken her out since the restoration. I thought you'd like it." Scarlett leaned in, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "I like it, because you like it. Just don't scare me, okay?" Jade didn't move, but her fingers clenched tighter around her grandmother's photo. Something about that kiss didn't look right. It was too placed, like part of a show. Not the kind Eden used to give her. Those were warm, quick, and messy. This was neat, performed. Basil believed it, though. His eyes softened as he looked at Scarlett, and he reached out to hold her hand. "Nothing's going to happen," he said. "It's just a drive." Scarlett smiled again, nodded, and let her hand slide out of his. "Then I'll go get ready for brunch. Don't get engine grease on your good jeans." He laughed as she walked back toward the door. Her steps perfectly timed, her posture straight, her gaze briefly drifting toward the camera mounted near the ceiling before she disappeared inside. Basil turned back to the Mustang, shaking his head affectionately. "She doesn't get it," he said softly to the car, "but I think you do." Jade stayed hidden long after Basil left the garage. Her heart was beating fast, not from fear of being caught, but from something she didn't have a name for yet. A feeling that the woman wasn't who she seemed to be. That the Mustang wasn't just a car to Basil. She leaned her head against the crate wall, listening to the faint sounds of the house. Through the vents, the murmur of Scarlett's voice in another room, the clink of dishes, the quiet creak of floorboards. She didn't know it yet, but this morning marked the beginning of something she couldn't walk away from. She had come here to hide, to survive, but what she'd found was something else entirely. A truth beginning to whisper in ways only children sometimes notice. The garage was dark, quiet, and colder than it had been during the day. Jade lay curled up behind a stack of storage boxes and paint cans, wrapped tightly in the worn sweatshirt that still faintly smelled like garden soil and lavender, the last trace of her grandmother Eden. Her stomach ached not in sharp pangs, but in that dull, heavy way that came from days of never being full. The crackers she'd taken from the outdoor kitchen earlier were long gone, and even the stale crusts had stopped helping. Every bone in her small body ached. Her lips were dry, her limbs sore, and her thoughts foggy from too little food and not enough sleep. Still, she didn't dare move, not when the house was alive and the people inside it were unpredictable. She was drifting in and out of an exhausted sleep when she heard the sound. Not loud, but clear. A soft beep from the interior keypad, then the click of the lock on the side door. It was just past midnight, she knew, because she had watched the digital clock on the garage wall blink from 11:59 before her eyelids finally drooped. But now the door was open again, and someone was coming in. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes snapped open and instinct pulled her tighter into the shadows. Her hands began to tremble. 2 sets of footsteps entered the garage, the floor creaking lightly under their weight. One pair moved with the precise click of heels, controlled, deliberate. The other set was heavier, slower boots that thudded rather than stepped. Jade's heart pounded in her chest. She dared not lift her head, but could make out faint shapes from the sliver of light spilling across the floor. She pulled her knees into her chest, clutching Eden's photo, closed the corner of the frame, digging into her ribs. One deep breath, then another. Don't cough, don't move, don't make a sound. A woman's voice came first, cool and measured. Everything's ready. He's taking the Mustang for a drive tomorrow morning first thing. Calls it a test run before the rehearsal. The man didn't answer right away. Jade heard the sound of a heavy bag dropping to the floor, followed by the metallic clink of tools being unzipped. The voice that followed was rougher, lower, with just a hint of strain. Where's the car parked after that? Back here, the woman said. Exactly where it is now. He doesn't suspect a thing. Still thinks I'm worried about his tie being wrinkled. Jade squeezed her eyes shut and tried to steady her breathing. Her mind raced her thoughts, jumping from one fear to the next. Who were they? What were they doing? Why were they here this late? She peeked just enough to see the Mustang's glossy red finish reflecting the faint overhead lights. The man, tall, dressed in black, wearing gloves, knelt beside the front wheel, a wrench in one hand, a flashlight in the other. Brake line runs through here, he muttered. You want failure on that curve, we snip just enough. He won't notice on the way up, but when he presses hard coming down. The woman stepped closer, crouching beside him. I want it clean. No guessing, no loose ends. I told you he's taking Ledge Point Drive. One curve, one chance. The man nodded and reached for a smaller tool. It'll hold during low pressure. The second he brakes hard, gone. Jade's stomach twisted, her mouth suddenly dry despite her thirst. She didn't understand everything they were saying. Not the mechanical words, not the insurance talk. But she understood what mattered. They were going to make Basil crash. They were going to kill him. She didn't know why, didn't know what he had done to deserve this, but she knew he didn't deserve to die. The woman stood and brushed her hands against her pants, then spoke again, her voice quieter, more serious. The policy was approved yesterday. $50 million. No delays, no second chances. Got it, the man said, tightening something beneath the car. No loose threads. It'll look like an accident. Jade felt hot tears prick the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the pressure, the confusion, the fear of being the only one who knew. She didn't dare cry out. She couldn't scream. She didn't even dare shift her weight, though her left foot had gone numb. She watched through the narrow gap as they moved around the car like they belonged there, as if destroying someone's life was just another item on their to-do list. They weren't rushing. They weren't nervous. They weren't worried about being seen because they had no reason to be. No one knew they were there. No one except her. The man stood and zipped up the tool bag, wiping his hands clean with a cloth. We done tonight, we are. The woman replied. He's out of town for a last-minute meeting. Car stays untouched until morning. When he gets back, it's showtime. They walked back toward the door. Jade felt her entire body ache with the need to shift positions, to breathe freely, to cry, but she didn't move. Not yet. Not until she heard the door close behind them. The click of the lock, the silence returning. It took nearly 10 full minutes after they were gone for her to unclench her fingers. Her arms ached from holding still. Her skin was damp with cold sweat. She slowly crawled out from the space, her knees shaking, her hands red and sore. She looked at the Mustang, the same car that had seemed like a miracle the night she arrived. Now it looked like a trap, a coffin on wheels. And Basil, he wasn't just some man polishing a car anymore. He was the target, the victim. Jade sat down slowly on the floor, her back against the cold wall. Her stomach growled again, but she didn't feel hunger anymore. She felt fear, the kind that didn't go away just because morning came. She looked down at her fingers. They were dirty cut in a few places from the crate she had crawled past, but they were steady now, not trembling. Her mind was tired, her eyes sore, but she was clear about one thing. She knew something terrible was about to happen, and she was the only one who could stop it. She whispered to the empty garage the words barely more than a breath. He doesn't know. He's gonna die if I don't say anything. She looked back at her hiding spot at the photo of Eden resting on a blanket. Her grandmother would have told her to speak up, to do what was right, even if it was scary. But Eden wasn't here. No one was here. Just her and the secret now sitting heavy in her chest. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. Every noise made her flinch. Every creak of the beams felt like footsteps returning. She stared at the Mustang at the place where the man had crouched and imagined Basil behind the wheel, smiling, driving off into what he thought was a new life. He had smiled at Scarlett like she was everything he'd waited for. Jade knew better now. She wrapped herself tighter in the sweatshirt and waited for morning, waited for courage, waited for the moment she would have to make a choice no child should ever have to make. Because if she stayed hidden, someone would die. And if she came forward, no one might believe her. But something inside her had shifted. She wasn't just hiding anymore. She was watching, listening, waiting. And she knew now doing nothing was no longer an option. The garage was darker than usual that night. The overhead lights had been switched off completely, and only the faint security glow from the outer sensor spilled through the side window, casting a dull, blue-tinted sheen across the polished hood of the Mustang. Jade hadn't planned to stay awake, but her body refused rest. Her legs were sore from crouching too long in the same spot her belly ached from hunger and her eyes burned with fatigue, yet she couldn't stop listening. Every soft creak, every shifting shadow made her heart jump. Something felt wrong, more wrong than usual. The silence broke without warning. The keypad on the side door beeped and a mechanical click echoed softly through the garage. The lock disengaged. Jade jerked upright, instantly alert. Her fingers clutched the edge of the crate she was hiding behind as she tried to steady her breath. The door creaked open slowly, then closed again. Footsteps. 2 people. One walked with sharp, crisp confidence, the other heavier, deliberate. She recognized the first voice immediately. Scarlett. "He's staying the night at the downtown loft," she said, her voice cold efficient. "He won't be back until noon tomorrow. We have 2 hours to make it clean. You have the tools." Jade barely dared to peek. She stayed low, her knees drawn tight to her chest, her breath trembling in her throat. Her entire body tensed as she heard the second voice reply, "Everything's in the bag. I brought the cutter sealant and gloves. We'll need to drain some of the fluid after we weaken the line so it looks gradual." Douglas. He didn't speak with emotion. His voice sounded like someone reading off a manual. Cold, measured, professional. Jade pressed herself closer to the wall, pushing her tiny body deeper into the shadows. Her sweatshirt was damp against her skin from sweat. Her hands trembled slightly, but she pressed them against the ground to steady herself. She knew that if she made a sound, if she even shifted too loudly, everything could fall apart. They couldn't find her. They wouldn't find her. They couldn't know she had seen what they were about to do. Scarlett walked toward the Mustang, heels clicking gently against the concrete floor. She ran her fingers along the edge of the hood and then motioned for Douglas to come forward. "Start with the front line on the driver's side. If he hits the brakes going downhill, it needs to snap under pressure, not before." Douglas knelt and slid under the car with a practiced ease, pulling the tool bag behind him. Jade heard the soft metallic click of a wrench and the scraping sound of rubber gloves sliding into place. She crouched completely still, her mouth slightly open as she tried to hear every word, every movement. The Mustang groaned softly under the weight as Douglas shifted beneath it. Then came a sudden clatter, a tool slipping from his hand and striking the floor. Jade's heart stopped. Scarlett spun toward the sound. What was that? Douglas grunted, dropped the clamp. It rolled toward the cabinets. Scarlett stepped toward it. For a moment, her face turned in Jade's direction. The light from the window caught her cheekbone, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the dark. Jade didn't breathe. She didn't blink. The air felt thick in her lungs. She thought for a split second she'd been seen. Her body tensed so tightly it hurt. She could feel her pulse pounding in her temples. Scarlett walked further toward the crates. Her steps slowed. Jade could see the heel of her shoe stop just a few feet from where she was curled up. Scarlett tilted her head listening. Her hand hovered at her side, still holding the flashlight. Jade squeezed her eyes shut and counted backwards silently. 10, 9, 8. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple. Her fingers dug into the concrete. Scarlett took one more step. Then the Mustang gave a subtle creak as Douglas shifted beneath it. Scarlett turned back, distracted. We really should get this place cleaned up. Too many things left out. She walked away. Jade exhaled silently, her whole body sagging slightly. Her knees ached, but she didn't move. She watched as Scarlett paced slowly along the car, checking her phone, shining a small flashlight at the base of the tires, inspecting Douglas's work. "This will be the last thing they remember him by," Scarlett said. Her voice had no emotion. The perfect tragic detail. Groom dies in vintage car crash day before wedding. Everyone will blame bad luck. Not bad people. Douglas slid out from beneath the car, sweat on his brow, breathing heavy but calm. Front lines are cut. I left just enough to give him a few blocks. If he speeds up on that downhill turn, he's finished. He will. He always does, Scarlett replied. Jade clutched her hands together tightly, her fingers digging into her palms. She wanted to run, to scream, to do something, anything. But all she could do was watch. All she could do was survive. Scarlett reached for a small cloth and began wiping down the Mustang's handle, then polished the hood one final time with a strange, almost affectionate motion. He loves this car, she said. It's poetic in a way. It'll kill him. Douglas packed up the tools quickly. They moved silently now, methodical. They checked everything. No fingerprints, no loose parts, no evidence. Scarlett turned off the garage lights, then stepped to the door. Tomorrow morning. He goes for his drive. By noon, he's a headline. The door clicked shut behind them. Jade stayed still in the dark for what felt like forever. Her breath was shaky. Her clothes clung to her damp skin. Her legs had gone numb, but she didn't dare stretch. She counted slowly to 100 before she let herself move. Crawling out from behind the crates, her limbs trembling with exhaustion, Jade stood for the first time in hours. She walked on bare feet, quiet as she could, toward the Mustang. Even in the darkness, she could see it now in a different way. Not as a beautiful machine, but as a trap. She knelt near the front tire where Douglas had been. Her fingers brushed the floor and came back sticky. Brake fluid. She didn't know the science, but she knew that wasn't right. Not there. Not like that. Staring at the car, her voice barely a whisper, she said, "They want you to kill him." The Mustang didn't answer. It just sat there, polished and deadly. Jade backed away, returning to her corner, curling up again with the photo of her grandmother pressed to her chest. Her stomach growled once more, but she didn't notice. Her thoughts were too loud. She had a choice to make. Stay silent and let it happen, or risk everything and try to stop it. But right now, she was just a little girl in a cold garage, shaking, scared, and very much alone. The morning air was still crisp and almost too quiet for a day that promised celebration. Sunlight filtered gently through the hedges along the back lawn of the Watts estate, making the dewdrops on the grass glisten like tiny pearls. It should have been the start of a perfect day. Inside the house, Scarlett moved with effortless grace, dressed in a pale blue robe, her hair pinned in a loose but deliberate updo, the kind that suggested casualness while requiring precision. She poured herself a cup of coffee, added a dash of cream, and sipped slowly while watching Basil through the kitchen window. He stood in the driveway in slacks and a button-down shirt, his expression content, keys in one hand, coffee in the other. He looked down at the Mustang, smiled, and reached to wipe something invisible off the hood with the side of his sleeve. Scarlett stepped outside, calling to him in that light, teasing tone she had perfected. "Don't take too long. You know we still have to finish the seating chart." Basil smiled over his shoulder. "I just want to make sure she still hums before the big day. One last spin. 10 minutes tops." Scarlett walked toward him, the grass barely crunching beneath her slippers. She wrapped her arms loosely around his waist from behind, leaning her cheek against his shoulder. "You in that car," she said with a soft laugh. "Honestly, sometimes I wonder who you're marrying." He chuckled, turned, kissed her forehead. "That car never lied to me. That's got to count for something." She let him go, smiling as she turned back toward the house, her fingers trailing lightly along his arm as she walked away. The moment her back was to him, the smile vanished. Jade saw all of it. From the edge of the garden, half hidden behind a trimmed hedge, she stood, barefoot legs, trembling, her entire body tight with anxiety and adrenaline. She hadn't slept at all. Her stomach was hollow, her mouth dry, but none of that mattered. She had seen what they did. She knew what was going to happen if she stayed quiet. And now she was watching him, the man who had never even seen her walk straight into a death trap while the woman next to him pretended to care. Her chest rose and fell in fast, shallow breaths. The sun was bright and warm, but she felt cold inside. She watched Basil move toward the garage keys, swinging gently in his fingers, oblivious. Her hands shook. Her throat clenched. But then she thought of her grandmother, of Eden's voice, whispering in her memory. "Do the right thing, little bird, even if it means being braver than you've ever been." Jade stepped out from the hedge. She ran. Her feet slipped on the damp grass. Her knees almost buckled from exhaustion, but she ran with everything she had, her arms pumping awkwardly, her voice straining. Sir, please don't get in your car. Wait." Her voice sliced through the morning stillness like an alarm. Basil froze mid-step, his hand just inches from the garage keypad. He turned slowly, confused, his brow furrowed. Jade stopped just short of him, panting hard, her hair wild, her clothes filthy, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Don't get in your car," she gasped. "Please, it's not safe." She broke it. "Last night, I saw them." Behind them, the screen door swung open, and Scarlett appeared wide-eyed and incredulous. "Oh my God," she said, hurrying down the steps. "What on earth?" Jade backed away, slightly eyes still fixed on Basil. She was here, with a man. "They opened the car and cut something. They said you would crash. They said it would look like an accident." Scarlett stepped closer now, playing concerned hostess to perfection. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "I think you must be very confused. Are you lost? Did someone hurt you?" Basil looked between them, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in disbelief, but in focus. He saw how the girl's hands trembled, how her voice cracked with real fear. Then he noticed something else, Scarlett stepping subtly between him and the car, as if shielding it. "You said they cut something?" he asked Jade. Jade nodded quickly. "The brake line. They said it would snap when you went downhill." She told him to make it look clean, that it would be the perfect story. Scarlett turned sharply. "Basil, this is insane. She doesn't even know what she's saying." But Basil wasn't looking at Scarlett anymore. He was looking at the Mustang, then back at Jade. "How did you get in the garage?" he asked. Through the side panel, Jade whispered, "It was loose. I didn't take anything. I just needed a warm place. But I saw them. I heard everything." Basil pulled out his phone and dialed a number without taking his eyes off Scarlett. "I want a mechanic over here, now. And tell Marcus to pull yesterday's garage footage." Scarlett took a step forward. "You're seriously going to trust the word of a trespassing child over me?" Jade flinched, but Basil remained calm. "If there's nothing wrong with the car, you've got nothing to worry about." Scarlett didn't speak. Her jaw clenched. She turned, stormed back inside. Basil looked at Jade. "You're not in trouble," he said softly. "Come inside. Let's get you something to eat. And thank you." Jade followed him into the house, still shaking, still uncertain if she had done the right thing. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. Basil didn't say a word as he led Jade into the house, one hand gently resting on her shoulder, the other still clutching his phone. His jaw was tight, his eyes focused not on the child beside him, but on the rush of thoughts stacking rapidly behind his furrowed brow. Jade moved with uncertain steps, still shivering despite the warmth of the sun outside, and when they reached the den, he motioned to the wide sofa. She sank into it slowly, her legs folding under her like she wasn't sure if she was allowed. He didn't ask questions right away. Instead, he turned to Maria, who had appeared silently in the archway, her brows drawn together in concern. "Can you get her something warm to drink? Maybe some toast or fruit?" Maria nodded once and disappeared without a sound. Basil turned back to Jade, crouching in front of her, so they were at eye level. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "No one is going to hurt you, but I need you to be honest with me. Everything you said outside. Is it true?" Jade looked down, clutching the edge of the blanket Maria had draped over her. Her voice came out rough, dry from sleep and fear. "Yes, I saw them last night. They went in the garage. She told the man to cut something under your car. He had tools. He dropped one." She wiped the door handle. Before Basil could reply, the door behind him opened. Scarlett stepped in slowly, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her tone carefully composed. "We need to talk. Privately." Basil didn't move. He looked up at her but kept his posture grounded. "We will. After I get answers." Scarlett let out a tight breath. "You're seriously entertaining the idea that this dirty, clearly traumatized child broke into our home and is now accusing me of attempted murder?" "Basil, listen to yourself." He stood, not fast but steady. "Then you won't mind if we get confirmation. I already called Tom. He'll be here in 10 minutes. He knows that car better than anyone. And I asked Marcus to pull the garage security footage." Scarlett flinched, not visibly, but in the tiny way her eyelids fluttered. "Footage I thought the garage camera had been acting up for weeks. You said that Basil replied, but I had it serviced last month. And I didn't tell you it was back online." Silence filled the room. Jade watched everything from the couch, her eyes darting from one adult to the other, her small fingers still clenched around the blanket. Basil glanced down at her. "You did the right thing," he said. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. The front door opened. Tom Bradley, a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, entered with a toolbox in one hand and a confused expression. "You sounded urgent," he said. "What's going on?" Basil gestured toward the garage. "Check the brake lines. Be thorough. Something might have been tampered with." Scarlett scoffed. "This is ridiculous. He's wasting your time, Tom." Tom looked from her to Basil, then shrugged and walked toward the garage. A minute later, Detective Victoria Robertson arrived, her badge displayed calmly, her voice even. "Mr. Watts, we received your request. Want to walk me through what's going on?" Basil nodded, stepping aside. "Let's talk outside." Victoria noticed Jade, but didn't speak to her yet. She followed Basil through the house. Scarlett stayed behind, pacing quietly, chewing the inside of her cheek. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, Tom returned, wiping his hands on a rag. His face was pale. "Brake line's been cut," he said, professionally. "Just enough left that it wouldn't show up on a quick test. But take that car down a hill, press hard on the brake, and you're dead." The room froze. Jade held her breath. Basil stared at Scarlett. Victoria returned, standing beside Tom. "I reviewed the garage footage on the system. It's all there. From last night. Clear picture, clear faces." She tapped her tablet and turned it around. The screen showed Scarlett walking into the garage at 1:43 a.m., followed by Douglas Walsh. They moved around the Mustang with precision. Scarlett pointed to the front tire. Douglas crawled under. Scarlett wiped the door handle with a cloth. At one point, a tool fell. Scarlett turned, listened, then shrugged. Scarlett lunged for the tablet. Victoria stepped back. "That's enough. Miss Rogers, you're under arrest for attempted murder conspiracy to commit murder and destruction of property." Scarlett exploded. "You have no idea what I gave up to be here. He has everything handed to him. Wealth, comfort, reputation. I earned my place here." She struggled as the officer cuffed her, but Victoria was calm. "You'll have time to explain yourself. In court." Basil stood still, watching Scarlett be led away. The woman he planned to marry. The woman who almost killed him. Jade sat motionless, unsure whether to look away or keep watching. Victoria turned to Basil. "That girl saved your life." Basil nodded slowly. "Yeah, she did." Jade looked up at him, her voice barely audible. "Am I going to jail for sneaking in?" Basil knelt again, his face softer now. "No. You're going to get something warm to eat, and a safe place to sleep. You did something incredibly brave, Jade. I owe you more than I can say." She nodded once. The blanket slipped slightly from her shoulder, and Basil gently adjusted it. The sirens faded. The morning light had changed. And for the first time in weeks, Jade let herself exhale without fear. The news broke faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours of Scarlett's arrest, the media frenzy had reached a full boil. Headlines shouted from every screen. Tech CEO nearly killed in sabotage plot, foiled by 6-year-old girl. Satellite trucks lined the edge of the private road leading into Laurel Heights. Reporters in crisp suits stood outside iron gates delivering live updates while drones buzzed just above the hedges. Every corner of the Watts estate seemed to be under a lens. Inside the house, Basil moved from window to window in silence, watching from behind drawn blinds. He hadn't gone into the office. He hadn't returned a single call from the board. All his energy was focused on the child down the hall, the one who had slept the last 2 nights in the guest room with the door cracked open, the one who flinched every time the house creaked or someone raised their voice. Jade hadn't said much since the morning of the arrest. She responded when spoken to, thanked Maria quietly when food was brought, and sat at the kitchen table with her shoulders pulled in and her hands hidden in her sleeves. She ate slowly, cautiously, as if she expected the plate to be taken away before she finished. When Basil asked if she wanted to watch something or read a book, she would just shake her head. At night, she curled up tightly beneath the covers, always facing the wall, always whispering the same thing to herself, over and over. Don't take me, please, don't take me. Maria noticed at first how Jade would take slices of toast and hide them in her sweatshirt when she thought no one was looking. Basil saw it too. She was storing food not because she was hungry in the moment, but because some part of her still believed this safety was temporary. She didn't trust it would last, and she had every reason not to. For weeks she'd lived invisible. No one had come looking. No one had protected her. Then she had saved a man's life, and now strangers were banging on the gates with microphones. Robert Tran arrived on Thursday morning, a man in his late 40s with calm eyes and a legal pad that never left his hand. He sat across from Basil in the study and laid out the options like a surgeon preparing for delicate work. "We can file for emergency guardianship effective immediately," he said. "It will give you full authority over Jade's medical and legal decisions for the next 90 days while we process the full adoption request. But there's a complication." Basil leaned forward. "What kind?" Robert flipped to a second page. "Yesterday we received contact from a man in Florida, Harold Walker. Claims to be Eden Walker's nephew. Says he's a licensed contractor, owns a small business. He wants custody." Basil's expression hardened. "Does he have any history with Jade?" "No," Robert said. "According to records, he hasn't seen her since she was a baby. But under the law, he's family. That gives him weight, especially if this goes before a judge." Basil shook his head slowly. "He called the press before he called us. He asked if the girl had spoken to any networks. He wanted to know about the footage, not her health." Robert nodded. "That's concerning, but not disqualifying. We'll need to gather everything: medical records, witness statements, psychological evaluations. We'll also need Jade to talk to a family services officer." That night, Basil sat beside Jade on the edge of her bed. She wasn't asleep. He could tell by the way her hands clenched the blanket. He waited a full minute before speaking. "Do you know what adoption means?" She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, without turning, she said, "It means someone picks you, but sometimes they don't keep you." His chest tightened. "If I picked you, Jade, I wouldn't let you go. Not ever." She turned then, her eyes too old for her age, steady and scared. "Even if the lady gets out, even if someone else says I have to leave." Basil reached out, gently took her hand. "Even if the whole world lined up outside this house and tried to take you, I'd stand right in front of them and not move. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you again. You have my word." The next morning, Maria found an empty toast plate but no crumbs in the sweatshirt. Jade had stopped hiding food. Outside, the reporters remained. But inside, something had shifted. The walls of the house didn't feel quite as echoey. And when Basil opened his laptop to write his first official statement since the incident, he didn't think about quarterly earnings or shareholder impact. He thought about Jade. He wrote, "A little girl saved my life. Her name is Jade Walker. She deserves a life of safety and love, not headlines. I ask that you give her space to begin healing. I intend to be part of that process." He clicked send. Then he closed the laptop and walked back into the kitchen where Jade was waiting, arms tucked in, eyes wide. "I didn't know what cereal to pick," she said. "You got too many." He smiled. "Well then, I guess we'll have to try them all." And for the first time since she arrived, Jade laughed just once, just a soft burst of breath. But it was a start. The courthouse hallway smelled faintly of floor polish and old paper, a sterile calm that didn't match the storm brewing behind the courtroom door. Basil sat on a bench just outside the family court chamber, his elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely, but his foot bounced with a restless rhythm he couldn't quiet. Across from him sat Jade, her legs swinging just above the ground. She wore a simple gray dress Maria had picked out and the same worn sneakers she had arrived in, freshly cleaned but still frayed at the seams. Her hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail and her fingers worked nervously at the edges of her sleeves. She hadn't said much during the car ride. She hadn't needed to. The weight of what was about to happen spoke loud enough. Inside the courtroom, attorneys shuffled files, the clerk adjusted the microphone, and the judge reviewed a thin stack of documents with practiced ease. Robert Tran, calm and professional as always, leaned down toward Basil. "Just answer honestly. Stick to what you know. You've done everything right. This is just the beginning of a process." Basil nodded but said nothing. It wasn't the process that worried him. It was what the system didn't always see. How do you measure protection? How do you file paperwork for love? They were called in. Jade stayed seated in the back row with Maria while Basil and Harold Walker, her great-uncle, stepped forward. Harold wore a crisp button-down dress pants and a belt with a shiny silver buckle. He stood with his lawyer at his side, a man whose smile looked like it had been stapled on under duress. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Introductions were brief. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a low voice and tired eyes, looked first to Harold's attorney. He spoke clearly. "Your Honor, my client is the only surviving blood relative of the minor in question. He has stable employment, a fixed residence in Florida, and a family support system that would ensure Jade is raised in a familiar, culturally appropriate environment." Basil didn't flinch, but the words familiar and culturally appropriate rang with subtle detachment. Robert stood next. "Your Honor, Mr. Watts is not a blood relative." but he is the only person who recognized and responded to an immediate threat to Jade's safety. He has provided consistent care, food, shelter, psychological support, and protection since the day Jade risked her life to save his. We're not here today to discuss bloodlines. We're here to talk about stability, trust, and the emotional well-being of a child who's been through more trauma in 2 months than most people see in a lifetime. The judge turned to Basil. "Mr. Watts, why do you want to become this child's legal guardian?" Basil stood. His hands stayed by his sides. He looked directly at the judge. "Because I didn't go looking for her. But the day she appeared, she gave me something I hadn't felt in years. A reason to care beyond myself. She didn't ask for help. She didn't want pity. She asked me not to get into my car because she thought it might kill me. And she was right. She was braver than anyone else around me. I didn't earn her trust, she gave it. I just want the chance to keep proving she was right to." The judge scribbled a note, then turned to Harold. "Mr. Walker, have you had any contact with the minor before the events in question?" Harold adjusted his collar. "No, Your Honor, but family is family. Blood matters, and I've got 2 sons and a wife ready to welcome her in. We believe she belongs with kin." Robert stepped forward again. "We have reason to believe Mr. Walker's motivations may not be entirely in Jade's interest. He's spoken to multiple media outlets, attempted to contact documentary producers, and requested access to private footage. We find that deeply concerning." Harold interrupted, his tone sharpening. "I got a right to tell my family's story. It's a miracle what happened. The world deserves to hear it." The judge raised her hand. "Enough." She turned to the back row. "Jade, would you like to say anything?" Jade looked at Maria, then at Basil, then back to the judge. Slowly, she rose and walked forward. Her sneakers squeaked slightly on the polished floor. When she reached the front, she stopped and took a breath. "He didn't know I was there," she said quietly, "in the garage. He never saw me, but it was warm, safe. He talked to his car like it was alive, and when I told him what I saw, he listened. He didn't say I was lying. He didn't say I was crazy. He believed me. When I had nowhere to go, he didn't ask me to leave. He brought me hot chocolate." The room was silent. The judge gave a faint nod. "Thank you, Jade. That means a lot." Jade hesitated, then walked back to her seat, but before she sat, she turned and walked over to Basil. She reached up and took his hand. The judge folded her hands. "Given the circumstances, the court will grant Mr. Watts temporary guardianship pending further investigation and psychological evaluation. This matter will reconvene in 60 days for a full review. In the meantime, Jade Walker will remain in his care." Basil exhaled, not in victory, but in relief. Harold muttered something under his breath and walked out of the courtroom, his lawyer trailing behind him. Robert placed a hand on Basil's shoulder. "It's not done yet," he said. "But she stays," Basil replied. "That's all that matters today." Jade looked up at him, her grip still tight. "Are we going home now?" He nodded. "Yeah, we are." The days after the custody hearing moved slower than any others since Jade had come to live with Basil. The world outside still buzzed with the occasional headline, but the media noise had dulled and the gates to the Watts estate stayed closed. Inside, the rhythm of life started to find its own beat, halting at first, like an orchestra tuning up before a concert, but steadier each day. Mornings began with cereal and warm light pouring through the breakfast nook. Jade had chosen the seat closest to the window, but she still kept her feet tucked up on the chair and her backpack within reach. Basil noticed that. He also noticed that she stopped hoarding food under her pillow, though she still asked almost every evening what the next day would look like. Not because she was excited, but because she needed to be sure that there would be a next day, that it wouldn't change without warning. They visited a bookstore one afternoon. Basil asked her to pick out notebooks and pencils, told her it was time to start planning for school. She nodded slowly, trailing her fingers over each cover, her expression unreadable, until she stopped at a sketchbook with a red Mustang on the front. She looked at it for a long time before taking it off the shelf. "Are you sure you want that one?" Basil asked gently. Jade hugged it to her chest. "Just in case I don't get to keep the real one." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he placed his hand on her shoulder and gave a slight squeeze. She leaned into it without realizing. At home, Maria made space in the kitchen cabinet for a row of lunch containers, each one with a different color lid. Basil watched Jade line them up on the counter one morning, arranging them by size, tapping them twice before putting them back in place. Maria raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. That afternoon, Basil scheduled Jade's first therapy session. The room was soft and pale, full of shapes and textures instead of harsh lights and chairs. Dr. Connors, a calm woman with glasses and a soft voice, handed Jade a box of markers and a large piece of paper. "Draw what your world feels like," she said. Jade didn't ask questions. She sat quietly and began drawing a large tree roots exposed and twisted. The trunk had a crack through it, and one side had fallen over. "What happened to the tree, doctor?" Connors asked. Jade answered without looking up. "It was standing for a long time, but then something made the ground open. And what about the roots?" Jade switched markers this time, picking green. She drew a new sprout near the broken tree. "They still want to grow, just somewhere else." Later, Dr. Connors pulled Basil aside. "She doesn't need fixing. She needs time, and someone who doesn't leave. You're already doing more than enough. Just stay." He nodded. "That part's not negotiable." 3 days later, Basil received a call from Detective Robertson. Her tone was even, but clipped. "Douglas Walsh posted bail. He was released 2 nights ago. We have surveillance on his known addresses, but he hasn't shown up at any. We're assuming he's trying to disappear." Basil tightened his grip on the phone. "You think he'll come back here? We're not ruling anything out. Increase your home security. Let us know if you see anything unusual." He hung up and immediately walked the perimeter of the estate. That evening, he called in a private security firm. Cameras were updated, motion sensors were installed at every ground floor entry point, but he didn't tell Jade. Not yet. She had earned peace, not paranoia. That night, just past midnight, the power flickered, only for a moment, maybe 3 seconds. But Basil was already on his feet, phone in hand, walking the halls. Jade opened her door, her face pale in the dim light. "Did it go out?" she asked. "Only for a second," he said. "It's back now." She looked down the hallway. "Are the cameras still on?" "Yes, and we have backups." She hesitated. "Is he coming back?" He crouched in front of her, steady and calm. "I don't know what he's doing, but if he does, he won't get near you. I promised you I'd stand between you and the world. That hasn't changed." Jade nodded once and returned to bed. He sat outside her room until the sun came up. 2 mornings later, Maria found one of the garden cameras tilted to the side. No damage, just a soft repositioning, as if someone had turned it by hand. The footage was blank. Basil didn't tell Jade, but he called Robertson again. "We'll escalate patrols," she said, "but don't lower your guard. He knows how to wait." Despite it all, life continued. Jade began practicing how to pack a school bag. She had a favorite spoon now. She picked her own pillow. When Basil handed her a small catalog to choose a new desk, she picked the plainest one. "It doesn't take up too much space," she explained. "Just in case I can't stay." Basil looked at her for a long moment. "What if you picked something because you were staying?" She didn't answer. But that evening, he found her sketchbook open on the table. She had drawn the house. In the window, 2 stick figures stood side by side, one taller, one smaller, both smiling. After dinner, Basil walked her to the backyard. "You ever had a treehouse?" Jade shook her head. "Never." He pointed toward the tallest tree near the garden wall. "Then we should probably change that before school starts." She smiled, small but real. It was the first moment in weeks he felt like something wasn't just surviving, it was growing. The storm rolled in fast wind, pushing against the tall trees that bordered the Watts estate, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Rain slapped against the windows with growing force, and thunder echoed somewhere deep in the Seattle hills. Basil was downstairs checking the backup generator when the lights flickered twice, then went dark for a full 10 seconds. The emergency power kicked in with a low rumble, restoring light to half the house. He stared at the circuit panel, jaw clenched. He didn't like this storm. It was too convenient, too close to everything they had feared might return. He pulled out his phone, texted the head of security to check the cameras again, and then walked room to room, making sure the doors were locked, windows latched, sensors active. By the time he reached the second floor, the wind was howling. Jade sat at the top of the stairs in her pajama pants and hoodie arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She hadn't called out, hadn't cried, but Basil could see it in her eyes. She remembered a night like this. He walked over, crouched beside her. "We still have power," he said softly. "Half the house is on backup. Security team is on alert." Jade didn't speak at first. Her voice was so small when it came out that he barely caught it. "It feels like that night." He nodded. "I know, but I'm here. No one is getting through that gate." She looked at him for a moment, then laid her head on his shoulder. "I believe you." He stayed there with her until the generator evened out into a steady hum. Then, as he stood to walk her back to bed, a faint sound caught his ear. A creak. Not floorboards, not plumbing, not wind. It came from the kitchen. His mind snapped into clarity. Jade was halfway up the hall, her hand trailing along the wall as she walked toward her room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't panic. He simply said, "Jade, go lock your door. Stay inside. Don't open it until I knock twice." She froze, looked back. Something in his tone made her obey instantly. Basil moved like he'd been trained for this. Years of boardrooms and private security briefings had taught him how to walk silent and think 2 steps ahead. He grabbed the heavy flashlight from the cabinet drawer and slid a kitchen knife into his belt. The lights in that part of the house were dim shadows creeping like fingers across the tile floor. He approached the kitchen and stopped just before crossing the threshold. The back door was open by 3 inches. A wet boot print smeared the marble. He tightened his grip on the flashlight. Then came the crash, something metal falling. Basil turned the corner fast and saw him. Douglas Walsh stood in the center of the kitchen, drenched, wearing black gloves and holding a crowbar. The tool was slick with rainwater, but the look in Douglas's eyes was dry and sharp. "You're slower than I expected," Douglas said, with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I figured the big hero would already be standing here with a gun." Basil didn't blink. "And I figured a coward like you would only show up during a storm." Douglas stepped forward fast. He swung the crowbar wild but hard. Basil ducked and rolled to the side, the bar crashing into the counter behind him with a deafening clang. The marble chipped. Basil didn't wait. He lunged, driving his shoulder into Douglas's chest. The impact threw them both into the dining chairs, which splintered under their weight. They hit the floor hard. Douglas grunted and scrambled back to his feet, tossing the crowbar aside and drawing a switchblade from his belt. "You want to play rough, old man? Let's go." Basil grabbed a chair leg and held it in front of him like a baton. "You don't get to hurt her again. Ever." Douglas feinted, then slashed. The blade grazed Basil's forearm, drawing blood, but Basil didn't back up. Instead, he caught Douglas's wrist, mid-strike, and twisted hard. The knife clattered to the floor. They grappled, fists swinging, legs kicking. Douglas punched Basil in the ribs. Basil slammed his head forward, connecting with Douglas's nose. Blood exploded across Douglas's cheek. They fell again, this time locked in a chokehold, rolling over broken glass. Basil could feel the breath rattling in his chest, but he didn't let go. Not when he could hear footsteps upstairs. Not when Jade might be watching. Douglas growled and elbowed Basil in the gut, scrambling free. He made a break for the hallway, but Basil tackled him at the base of the stairs. They crashed into the wall. "Get off me!" Douglas screamed, reaching blindly. But it was too late. Red and blue lights lit up the windows. The front door exploded open. 2 officers stormed in, weapons drawn. On the ground, Basil pushed off just in time for Douglas to be pinned. Detective Robertson came in behind them, breathless, soaked her badge out. "Douglas Walsh, you're under arrest for attempted murder, unlawful entry, and violation of parole." Douglas tried to spit, tried to lunge, but 4 hands held him down. As they dragged him out, Jade stood at the top of the stairs, face pale, but strong. Basil turned and met her eyes. "It's over," he said, and this time she believed him completely. The following morning, the house was quiet, the air freshly cleaned by the night's storm. Maria made breakfast without needing to ask what anyone wanted. Jade sat at the table with a bowl of cereal she finished completely for the first time. Basil joined her, one arm bandaged, but his posture relaxed. Later that week in court, the last of the paperwork was reviewed. Judge Thompson looked down at Basil and Jade and gave a firm, almost maternal nod. Effective today, the court recognizes Basil Watts as the legal guardian of Jade Walker, now Jade Watts. Outside the courthouse, Basil and Jade walked hand in hand down the stone steps. No reporters, no cameras, just the sound of traffic and birds and a spring breeze that carried no threat. At home, the treehouse stood nearly finished. Jade had picked out the paint colors, the curtains, and the name that would hang above the door. One afternoon, as the sun dropped low, Basil helped her hang the small wooden sign she had painted herself. It read, "We belong here." And they did. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this emotional story, a journey of resilience, love, and second chances. If Jade and Basil's transformation touched something in you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share how their bond made you feel. And if you believe, like we do, that sometimes the most powerful families are the ones we choose, Don't forget to follow for more heartwarming videos and touching stories with unexpected twists and the kind of empathy that stays with you long after the credits roll. See you in the next chapter.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.